Hi everyone, and welcome to today's BSc Sport and Medical Science Open event, also known as SEMS. And thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Aaron Shah, and I'm a current SEMS student here at UCL in your chair today. And we hope that you've had the chance to already watch our Faculty of Medical Science Open Day video on our website, and that this Open Day Q&A session will address those course-specific questions you may have, and will help you to get an insight into what it is really like to study our BSc SEMS undergraduate program. Today, our speaker is Flaminia Ronca, and she'll provide us with an overview of the structure of the BSc program, followed by a Q&A session and plenty of interactive opportunities for you all to join in throughout today's event. This session is being recorded and will be made available following today's event, and we're here to respond to your questions, so please share those throughout using the Q&A function on Zoom. Now, to introduce Flaminia Ronca is a program director of the IBSc and BSc course in Sport and Exercise Medical Sciences at the Institute of Sport, Exercise and Health here in London. At UCL, she delivers a unique, innovative program that will provide experienced graduates with a practical experience and insight into clinical applications of exercise and physical activity in both clinical and athletic contexts. Now over to Flaminia. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Aaron, and thank you everyone for joining today. So I do have a few slides to show you. First of all, welcome. And what I like to do in today's session, first I'll cover a little bit, I'll give you some examples of projects that students have been doing over the past years. And I think I like to open with that because it gives a little flavor of what you might expect to do throughout your 3 years at UCL. And then after that, I will talk about the actual program, what you will study throughout the 3 years and the different modules. As we go through, please feel free to put questions in the chat, and at the end, Aaron and I will stay on, and we're very happy to have a conversation with you if you have any questions, or if you'd like to ask anything either about the program or careers or just about student experience. That's why we've got Aaron with us today. So before we dive into student projects, sport and exercise medical sciences is a bit different from sports science, so I know you must be thinking about applying to one or the other. The difference is that we put a very strong emphasis on the clinical applications of physical activity and exercise. So we are merging together medical sciences with sports science, and then of course, it has a very strong basis on scientific research. I'd like to start with this slide because quite often when students are applying for sports-related degrees, you will be thinking about why you're applying for sports. Is it just because you love running around? Is it because you want to be able to heal people's injuries and you find that aspect interesting? So students will come at this from different perspectives, and having a bit of a split of what the different degrees do seems to be useful. So we've got sports science, which is not what we teach. We've got physiotherapy on this other side, which is not what we teach. And then we've got sport and exercise medical sciences in the middle, which is what this program teaches at UCL. So if you went to study sports science, you would focus on performance, on biomechanics, on coaching, on getting a healthy person fitter and faster and stronger, essentially, and all the different things that come in with that. You would not receive a background in the clinical applications of exercise. You would not study about different diseases. And you would not study how to rehabilitate an injury. So sports science does not teach those things. It focuses very much on performance, on healthy individuals and how to work with them. On the other end of the spectrum is if you say, oh, I'm interested in physiotherapy because I want to heal athletes' injuries. So on that end of the spectrum, if you studied physiotherapy, you would get a very, very strong clinical background, but not just on injuries. You would focus on everything that has to do with physiotherapy. So there are neurological diseases. There's much more beyond just sports injuries. Sports injuries is a very small part of physiotherapy. So there's a lot more to it. You do become a clinician. It does teach you how to assess injuries, how the healing process happens in injuries, But in physiotherapy, you do not study how to rehabilitate an injury. So if an athlete gets injured, first they go to the physiotherapist who will help them throughout the healing process. But once the injury is healed and you need to strengthen the joints again and the muscles again to get back into play, the physiotherapist hands the athlete onto an expert who focuses on that specific process. So physiotherapy, the degree itself, doesn't teach that bit. That's what we teach. So onto our program, what does sport and exercise medical sciences teach? So first of all, we provide a very strong scientific basis on how to work with both athletes and clinical populations. So we do talk about performance and how to get a person fitter and faster and stronger, but we also talk about the prevention and management of disease through physical activity. So how can I help a person, for example, get over type 2 diabetes? If they've developed type 2 diabetes, can I reverse it with exercise and lifestyle interventions? If a person has cancer and they're undergoing treatment, how can physical activity help them manage going through treatment? Same with COPD or heart failure, osteoarthritis, and so on and so forth. So that's really what's different about our program. You study how the body works in both in a healthy state and in the disease state. And then how does exercise fit into that? That's what's different between us and sports science. And another thing that's different is that we do teach you how to prevent, assess, and rehabilitate an injury. And it's very specific to sports injuries. Again, if you wanted to become a physiotherapist, you get a much broader understanding of what happens to a body that's not working the way it should. If you're interested very specifically in sports injuries, then that we do focus on. Last thing to say before we move on, if you wanted to become a physiotherapist who's specialist in sports injuries, then what many of our students do is they study our degree. They get a very strong basis in the sports elements, and then they do a 2-year master's degree in physiotherapy. So they become a registered physiotherapist. So they get the best of both worlds without having to study the additional aspects on general population, which are not relevant to sport. So hopefully that's clear, but like I said, Aaron and I will stick around afterwards to talk about this and answer any questions you might have. So on to student projects. This gives you an overview of the experts in sports who will be teaching you on this program. We are part of a much wider team. You will also taught by doctors and scientists in other clinical realms, but specific to sport, we've got cardiology, specialist physiotherapist Paul Thawley, who's been working in the Olympics who has worked in the Olympics for over 20 years. We have nutritionists and experts in supplementation and strength and conditioning. And then my specific interest is the brain. So you get a background from lots of different experts from lots of different fields. And we supervise a student project. So this is our lab. If you came to visit us in one of the in-person open days, we would be doing some interactive things in the lab. And these are some pictures from student projects that have been happening over the past couple of years. More pictures. We like our brain imaging pictures. And out of the brain imaging, this is one example of a student project I supervised a few years ago. And without going into too much detail, what we did is we scanned people's brains, as you can see here, before and after doing what's called a VO2 max test. So running on a treadmill or a bike until exhaustion. And what we saw was that our participants' brains were much more active after exercise compared to before exercise. So yellow means more active, and this is the frontal part of your brain right underneath your forehead, which is the part of the brain that we use to make decisions, to focus, to pay attention, to control our behaviors. So it's great news that our brain becomes more active after exercise. And what we're showing here is that actually there's a relationship between how much more active our brain becomes and how fit a person is. So not only is exercise great for everybody, it wakes us up, but people who are fitter seem to benefit even more from this effect. So there's something to be said about making sure that we are active and fit. And so if we wanted to prescribe exercise for people from a mental health perspective, so mental well-being is a very hot topic at the moment. This is another student project where we looked at different forms and different intensities of exercise and what that did to people's moods. And what you see here, this is change in mood. So a higher box means a bigger improvement in mood. And while all forms of exercise seem to improve mood, you see everything is above 0. 30 minutes of a good, strong session on a bike or a run seems to be the most effective way of improving people's moods. So again, it's we're looking at the details and how to recommend, how to make recommendations for our friends and for our family. If our brother or sister isn't feeling too well today, they're a bit depressed, well, send them off on a run. And if they do a hard session, then that'll be the best thing they can do. We also have projects going into schools. So this is a fantastic project that some of our students ran a few years ago, looking at reducing sedentary behavior during classroom time. So getting children to stand up and move around during lessons. And what we found was that after 9 months of changing the way that teachers taught, children in the intervention schools lost weight. So here we can see waist to height ratio, which is a measure of how fat our bellies are. And you can see a dramatic reduction in the intervention schools. And this is a fantastic narrative because, like I said earlier, it's not just about sports. It's about the general population. It's about making people healthier and more active. And sometimes that means standing up and walking around, not necessarily doing lots of sports and high intensity exercise. And why this is important in children is because, going back to the brain, we see this both in children and in adults, there is a relationship between obesity and cognitive function. So what you're looking at here is children who carried more belly fat had slower reaction times on an attention task. So we're not measuring intelligence. This is not about how smart the children are, but it is about how quickly our brain processes information. And we are seeing a relationship between that and obesity. So it's quite important that we find ways to help the general population be active and healthy for their brain development. For those of you who are doing biology, I presume you do, you might recognize this as the menstrual cycle. And if you are interested in female health, we have projects that have been running, again, student projects looking at how changes in hormones throughout the menstrual cycle impact our cognitive function, and how they potentially might be linked to injury risk throughout the cycle. So that's another really exciting and interesting project that you can do as part of your degree. This is a project that's run by one of our colleagues, Dr. Tarun Desai, who specializes in nutrition and supplementation. He studied the impacts of cherry juice on cardiometabolic health. So I believe he looked at blood pressure, and supplementing with cherry juice alongside doing exercise seems to reduce people's blood pressure. So you can see how nutrition and exercise go hand in hand and can provide an added benefit. Again, on nutrition, for those of you interested in supplements, our colleague Tom Gurney focuses on algae. If you've heard of spirulina and chlorella, these are two algae that contain lots of vital micronutrients that are important for how our body functions. And he's interested in seeing if supplementing with these components might improve performance in athletes. So again, going back to what you will study, yes, you study about general population, clinical applications, public health, but you also do study how to make people faster, stronger, fitter, and how does nutrition play a role in that. If you're interested in performance, here's another study by Tarun Desai looking at table tennis, and he measured the oxygen demands of table tennis. And one thing that was quite interesting is he placed ice on the neck of table tennis players to see if that improved their performance just by cooling down their bodies. While there wasn't an actual change in body temperature, there was an improvement in performance. So he talks about how there might be a placebo effect with just feeling a little bit cooler helps you focus on your performance rather than on how hot you're feeling during a tournament. So if any of you have a competition coming up, putting a bit of ice on your neck might help. It can't hurt, so why not? Go ahead and try it. If you're more interested in muscles, this is the last example I'll show you. In strength and conditioning, this is a project that we ran where we had EMGs, so electromyographs, which are little electrodes that you place on your skin and measure your muscle activation. And we were interested in looking at the difference between training with elastic tubes and training with weights. So if any of you do any weight work in the gym, you might be familiar with these. And they do produce very different adaptations. It's not the same thing, an elastic tube and a weight. So we were interested in understanding when the muscle becomes more active with the two conditions. So hopefully this gives you a bit of an overview of types of projects that you could do if you decided to join this program. And I will move on to the education side, which is what exactly will you be studying if you join this program? And Aaron, as I talk through the different modules, I will ask you to chip in once I'm done and let us know which were your favorite modules and why. So we've got the 3 years of study. These are the modules that focus more on performance. So you start your first year by studying the heart and the lungs and the musculoskeletal system and how everything works together. And then you build on in year 2, you study how to design strength and conditioning programs. And then in year 3, you put everything together and learn about the supplements and the training and the psychology and how can we optimize performance that way. You also have a series of modules that focus on anatomy, on the nervous system, on infection, on injuries, and on rehabilitation. And that goes throughout the 3 years. And what's different, I think what I quite like about the anatomy module is that it's functional anatomy. You look at scans, which is not something that you would typically do in a pure sports science course. You would learn the muscles and the bones and how they work, but we take slightly different approach and we say, right, here's an MRI scan of a muscle. Is it injured? Is it not? What are we looking at? So it's a different approach to sports science. You have a series of modules that focus on the organs in the body, so the gut and the liver and the kidneys, and how do they work in health and in disease. So what are the most common diseases? And then we link that into nutrition and pharmacology, and finally into sports nutrition. You have a series of modules that focus on psychology. These are new modules, sports psychology in year 2, exercise neuroscience in year 3. Which are very exciting additions to the program. And you also study the effects of physical activity on specific diseases. So once you have learned about the gut and the liver and the heart and the lungs, in exercise medicine, you then study, okay, if this person has a problem with their lungs, what type of exercise should I be using? And how can I understand their pathophysiology? And how can I help them manage their symptoms? And the final thing is the research project, which I've shown you some examples of. Aaron, if you're with us, can I bring you in? Do you want to give us a few points on which were your favorite modules throughout the 3 years? You are still muted. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was just muted for some reason. I quite enjoyed the muscle physiology in year 2. That's just because it's a personal interest of mine, and I think learning from Joe, I don't know if he was on the last slide or not. He worked at Chelsea, so he brings a very practical element to it. I mean, pretty much all of the sport ones that we do at ICH are very practical because you'll have somewhat or some sort of experience in the professional field rather than purely just academic based, which is quite nice to know that you've applied what you're teaching us and it actually is of benefit to the field and the industry. Also quite enjoyed sports nutrition. I'm not really too sure why, but I think it was just something new, something different. it's sort of because you do a lot of the medical stuff and the clinical side of things in year one. It's quite nice when you get to year two and year three, you switch to the sports side a bit more. So yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much, Aaron, for that overview. And like I said earlier, if anyone has any questions for Aaron about the modules and the study mode, please do either put them in chat or you can unmute at the end of the presentation. And we are coming to an end of the presentation. So just very quickly to show you what exactly will you be learning throughout these 3 years. And while you will learn to work in a lab and you will have the biochemistry lab with the microscopes, but you will also have the sports-specific labs where you will be running around in the lab and jumping up and down and testing each other. You will learn how to assess injuries, again, if you have an interest in physiotherapy, but also how to design strength and conditioning programs, both for healthy and for injured participants. You will learn how to prescribe exercise to specific clinical populations, and you have a whole assessment on that. And of course, we will teach you how to solve problems that will make people's lives healthier and happier, hopefully. How will you learn? Yes, there will be the big lecture theatre experience, which is a staple university experience in a couple of your modules in the first year, but actually we put a big emphasis on learning in small groups. You will be put from the first year into smaller groups of 8 to 10 students, and you'll work together through problem solving and on projects. Like I said, you work together also in the lab, so lots of practical experience, like Aaron mentioned. You will be building lots of transferable skills, like presentations. Some of our students, after they've completed their degree, they go on to present their projects at conferences. This is not mandatory, but for those of you who have an interest in these things, it's absolutely a possibility, and we really encourage our students to go out into the world and share what they've learned. You will be assessed in lots of different ways. And yes, there's the written exams and the MCQs and the group presentations, but we also do some more creative things. You will be creating videos, and you will be writing blogs. So there will be some fun ways, some reflective practice, etc. There will be fun ways of being assessed. The ICH runs its own conference every year, but we always have access to conferences in the sports world. So these are always opportunities that you have access to. And student research we have spoken about. So I think final thing to cover, you might be wondering, are careers. If you do this degree, you can absolutely go and work in elite sports if that's what you're interested in coaching and in performance. But you can also go and work in a clinical setting if you want. So there is a new registered profession called clinical exercise physiologist. This is a profession that the allied healthcare professionals in the UK will determine as a registered profession within 1 or 2 years. So by the time you graduate, this will be a registered profession. So you can go and work into exercise medicine, in prescribing exercise for specific populations of patients, but you can go into public health and work in policy. You can end up in academia, become a professor. You can go into industry. So some students end up creating their own startups and developing a new app or a new technology, or working in supplementation industries. Or of course, like I said, you can become a physiotherapist if you do a master's degree, which is a 2-year pre-registration in physiotherapy. Or some of our students also end up in graduate medicine, which is also an option. And that's 4 years instead of 5 or 6 years. So I think what's fantastic about sport is that it opens lots of doors in lots of different fields. So it's a very versatile degree. If you know that you love sport, you don't quite know what you want to do with your life, but the one thing that you know is that you're active, you love making people healthier and happier, well, then this is the degree for you. And you don't have to know what job you want to do quite yet. Just enjoy university. You will get there. You will study on Bloomsbury campus mainly. So we're in central London. This is our medical sciences library, which you have access to. And some of the courses are also up at the Royal Free in Hampstead. And this is the Institute of Sport, Exercise and Health, where I am at the moment, which is very close to the Bloomsbury campus. I like to show this. This is an old slide, but very proud of UCL. If you are applying for UCL, you probably know this already. We are top 10 in the world consistently in lots of disciplines, in medicine in particular, in psychology and neuroscience as well. So, and these are two very strong aspects of the course that you'd be studying. So you would be very well placed if you studied at UCL. And of course, we produce lots of Nobel Prize winners. That this is from several years ago, 29. There will be more by now. And UCL has a fantastic legacy of being founded on ideas of diversity and inclusion, and wanting to make sure that higher education is accessible to people from all backgrounds. So it's a fantastic place to be a part of. And the institute specifically where I am at the moment is a collaborative institute. So we have partners from lots of different parts of the elite sporting world who work here together. And hopefully this is what you will look like in 3 to 4 years once you graduate. So if you are passionate about sports and you want to do something to improve people's lives, then maybe this is the program for you. If you have any questions, feel free to take a screenshot of our emails, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. And I will stop sharing screen now, and I will hand the word back to Aaron.
Now that Flaminia has finished presenting, do any of you have any questions? You can feel free to just put them in the Q&A section on Zoom, or I'm not sure if you can, but if you're brave enough, you can happily unmute yourself and just ask.
Be brave. I promise you we're very nice people. We will not bite.
We've got a question. I'm not sure if they've changed from when I was, but Flaminia, what are the grade requirements for this course?
I believe it's AAB, if I'm not mistaken, but there are contextual offers as well, which are a bit lower, at least ABB. You do need to make sure that you've got biology and math. So chemistry is not mandatory, but biology is.
Any other questions?
I'm wondering what sports everybody does. If you want to put it in the chat, let us know. What is your favorite sport? Do you compete at anything? What is it that brought you to considering studying sports? Aaron, what sports do you do?
I mean, I used to play rugby. I haven't really played much now, but now I'm just into running and the gym. And
Aaron is very big. You can't tell on the video call, but he's definitely suited for rugby. I'm not surprised.
does this course offer any kind of placement work?
Funny you should ask that. I've got two answers for that. One is potentially exciting news. We have just put in a request for an amendment for the program to add a work experience module in year 3. The reason I haven't mentioned it in the presentation is because I haven't received approval yet. So until the module has been approved, we shouldn't really be advertising. But know that it's a possibility that there might be something formal embedded within your degree that will support you to do some work experience. Having said that, regardless of whether that gets approved or not, some students decide to take a year out to do a year of an internship somewhere and then come back. That's absolutely a possibility if you wanted to do that. And the university has the student union, lots and lots of opportunities for work experience, for volunteering, and for internships. So if you did join UCL, we would definitely encourage you to connect with the student union. And there are lots of opportunities there, regardless of whether that ends up being part of the actual degree or not. I guess watch this space, and by September, you will know if the work placement has been approved or not.
I think as well, just to add that, because we have so many guest lecturers, a lot of them come from either like other unis or companies. So a lot of them offer some sort of internship with their process. So recently we had AI Scout come in with one of our modules in 3rd year, and they offered a few internships out if you applied. So just add that in.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had several students end up getting jobs through connections and guest speakers who have come in to talk about work placements. So it's definitely something. Career support is something that we're quite keen on offering to our students. We know how important that is. Thomas, it's great to hear that you play rugby as well. What position do you play in, Thomas? You are able to unmute, by the way, if you wanted to. You don't have to. Winger. Aaron, what position did you play in?
I used to play number 8, but yeah, I haven't played in a while, so probably changed now.
Any advice for Thomas, who's earlier on in his rugby career than you?
I think a big thing like people misunderstand about coming to London is they think the opportunities to play a lot of sport goes down because you're in a city, but I think it's very opposite to that. In fact, you have so many opportunities. You have the uni itself, but then within London, there's hundreds of rugby clubs, whether they're semi-pro, pro. There's so much sport going on everywhere, so you'll always pretty much have something to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think London is a very active city. So something I noticed when I came here years ago. It's fantastic. And we are very close to Regent's Park and Hyde Park, which are, you know, fantastic for running if anyone's into running.
There's the new campus, which is by the Olympic Stadium and stuff. So
yeah, exactly.
what sort of things can we do for extracurricular activities to be a more desirable applicant, and what are the traits of a successful applicant?
That's a very good question. So I guess you're talking about your personal statement. I think so. I'll start with a mistake. One mistake many applicants make when they are applying for sports is they talk a lot about their sports and say how many games they won or how many goals they scored. And the university is, while that it's fantastic to show that, that's not exactly what the admissions team will be looking for. They'll be looking, if you do play sports and you're very proud of it and you did say win lots of games, what did you learn from it is what we're interested in. So did you develop leadership skills or team building skills, and were there particular moments in your athletic competitions or trainings that made you reflect either on yourself or on your career or on your studies? So if you do want to talk about your sporting experience, that is good, but make sure you do it through a lens of either leadership development or scientific development or academic or something along those lines. And I guess throughout the entire statement, that's really what the university is looking for, is that you demonstrate a level of intellectual engagement in the field. So why do you want to study sports? What is it about? Is it the biomechanics? Is it the physiology? Is it the fact that you want to somehow make a change and help people become healthier? Something along those lines. Also, you might want to demonstrate that you have been reading about this topic and you've been learning. So you might want to mention a piece of scientific work that you've read that is relevant to sports medicine that you found interesting, and why did you find it interesting, and is that what, I don't know, what sparked your decision to apply for this type of course. So those are the types of things we are looking for.
What's it like being a student in London? I think the easiest way to say is there's never really a dull moment. There's always something going on, whether obviously you have lectures, whether you have your societies, whether you're going out at night, weekends, pretty much everything, and not really much else to say except you pretty much always have something going on, which is quite nice, because I think when you go to uni, it's a big switch from school where you don't have a set routine constantly, and it's quite hard, quite easy almost to just get stuck doing nothing. But I think in London, it's quite difficult to just be sitting around doing nothing. So, yeah.
It's definitely a lot to do. You won't get bored in London.
I think that's as well in terms of like a sports degree, you wouldn't really find in any other big city. Whereas UCL offer it in London. And I think the other leading unis in terms of that do sports degrees are very isolated in terms of things to do there, which I think sometimes isn't always great.
And there's lots of student discounts all over the place as well, isn't there? So cafes and restaurants and clubs, lots of them do student discounts.
Yeah, and then your first year anyway, you're in halls, and more or less all the halls are very central. You're probably like 10-15 minute walk max from Oxford Street area. And then from the institute, 5-10 minute walk. Are there any open days? Is there an opportunity to come in and have a look around?
Yeah, there absolutely are. And our marketing team will be sharing those dates. Normally open days, there might be one in September, October, I'm not sure. There will definitely be one. I don't think there will be one before the summer, but definitely September, October, there should be something. So watch out for emails. In fact, I don't know if that's something, Kate, who is with us, if I don't know if you have any more insight than that.
Yes, sorry, Flaminia, I was going to jump in actually. I will share a link in the chat just so everyone can obviously have the details to the in-person open days. But we do have two taking place. So one on the 28th and 29th of June, 2024. I don't believe you can book onto that yet, but do sign up and register your interest, and they'll definitely send you an email once you can book your place to that one. And we will be planning a further open day in September as well. But yes, if you just sign up, I'll put the link to how to register, and you'll get the details for those once they're available.
Thank you, Kate. You're very welcome, Thomas.
Do we have any more questions?
Well, I will put my email in the chat if anybody has any specific questions that you want to ask me. Otherwise, of course, the admissions, if anything about admissions, I won't be able to answer, unfortunately. But any questions about the degree itself, or what you might study, what that might look like, feel free to email me. And any questions about admissions, of course, email the admissions team directly.
If that's everything, then I'll say thank you to Flaminia for joining us today, and thank you to everyone for your questions and joining us. Thank you, Kate, for organizing this, and have a great evening.
Thank you very much, Aaron, and thank you everyone for coming. Have a great evening.